Happy day, Jen.
Happy day, Andrew. It is such a beautiful day to be
It's
at a coffee shop with you.
gorgeous. It's like 70 degrees and sunny.
Yeah. We had
First week of November.
we had the option of recording in a studio or outside, and every opportunity we can be outside, I'll take it.
Exactly. So what's going on in your world?
What's going on in my world? It's Tuesday.
No.
Yep.
Okay. It's a lot.
there is a lot going on. Let's see. Uh, my husband is traveling out of the country, and my oldest daughter is out of town. And historically, that has left me a very anxious person.
Mm.
Um, but I've learned how to manage that, where I'm a little less anxious.
How have you learned to handle that?
I'm glad you asked. Um,
It's almost as if we had rehearsed this, but we
we did it.
haven't.
We did it. Um, recognizing like my triggers for anxiety, and one of them being the sole person responsible for the house not catching on fire and the kids being okay. So just knowing that that has historically caused a trigger me to be anxious, recognizing it and knowing that through my meditation practice and all the tools, my tool belt for shutting up my anxiety, I put them into use more so. Like I'm the whole toolbox is out on the table now, and
So
I
you're not
just
worried about the house burning down because that's kind of a. I mean, it's possible, right? But it's kind of
yeah,
an irrational fear,
yeah.
because unless you've had a lot of fires at your house.
No, no.
I
So
mean, I've met your kids.
it
It's
could
quite
be
quite
possible,
possible.
quite possible. So where before I would lay in bed like, oh my god, I didn't lock all the doors, I didn't turn off the stove. Now I just go down, I look, I'm like, it's done, it's done, it's handled. Go to bed.
Love it. Well, let's jump into that today. Again, this is the
My
podcast.
anxiety. No, it's not.
That's a that's an ocean too deep for
Too
us to
deep.
swim.
Yeah.
But I think we'll talk about anxiety, triggers, and all of those things on our episode of the
No
Expectations, the
expectations.
podcast. So again, what we do here is unrehearsed, unscripted. If you couldn't figure that out by now.
Thanks for hanging on with us.
We just like to have spiritual conversations in a real, authentic manner, and just we like to spend a lot of time at coffee shops
Yeah,
because we feel like we do our best work here. At least I
absolutely.
do. I don't know what you've been doing, how you feel about your work.
Yeah, and the more caffeine you put in me, the a little bit better I get. The face I just got, wow,
So,
needs improvement.
so we think about. I'm just gonna go ahead and skip right over
We need a fast forward button
that.
today.
My rant card. I left my rant card in my other pants. Um, so we think about triggers in a spiritual practice, um, and probably spoken about this on an other episode of the podcast. But the word shenpa, which is a Tibetan word we use in the Buddhist practice, there's really no direct translation to English um, about what that word means. But it's the idea of, we kind of think about it as a physical fish hook. Um, and if we think about a hook, uh, it it lands in our body, if we will, and um, and where that takes us. So we think about something that happens in our life, our day to day experience with something that maybe agitates us, and there's already kind of like a predetermined pathway, where this stimuli is going to lead us. So if, let's say, I'm standing in line in front of somebody at the coffee shop and they're taking a really long time to place an order, like, oh, I don't know what kind of coffee I want. Maybe I start to get anxious, like, and so the
Or
hook has landed, it's
yeah,
already in my body, and I'm already thinking, like, where this thought process goes. So it goes from Andrew being calm and patiently waiting for his cup of coffee, but this person in front of me has agitated me, and now I've gone into this, like, this place is the worst. I never want to come back to this coffee
just
shop
order
again.
your
Just
Make your
order your
coffee.
coffee, for God's sake. How difficult can it be, right? So it's like noticing cause and effect.
Mm.
I think so. And in our mindfulness practice, what we want to do is start to realize before the hook lands, right? To notice that so that we can change the narrative, if you will, change the path of that, what that emotion will turn into.
Yeah. So, like in my case, knowing my husband was going to be traveling, he booked this trip a while back. I knew at that moment that's going to be a hard week.
Right.
And my mindfulness, my practicing of it allowed me to be in a space where, all right, it's going to be hard. Here's how you prepare for this event so that the triggers don't send you in a spiral of negative emotions.
It's not always negative. It could be, it could hype you up. It could be anything, right? And it's also just kind of like um, not letting the expectation rule the day either,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But it's being aware of that. So it's kind of like this pre-awareness, which people are like, man, it's hard enough to be aware all the time. You're asking me to be
You
pre-aware?
want me to tell
Well,
the
it's
future.
not to tell the future, but just like notice it before it hits. So not to make it a personal, see, that was a great personal anecdote you just gave there about like what it's going to be like if your partner's out of town and the responsibilities that are laid upon you. I think about it as um, there was a class I used to teach, just a vinyasa class, and every once in a while I would just mix it up, and I'd have a lot of really strong asana practitioners would come to the class, like very strength, strong people, knew their work, could do all the asanas that I asked them to do, and so every once in a while I would just wild card it. I would show up and I'd play a whole hour of punk music in the background just to see if we could really, where was the strength? Was it physical or was it mental? Or were they just so used to, just this ethereal music playing in the background that like they were just kind of in their zone? So
Mm-hmm.
on occasion I would play something that was completely off base to test their mental fortitude.
Playing the Sex Pistols in a yoga class. Okay.
You got that straight.
Damn right. Okay. All right.
It not so not
But
to
how distracting? Like in a
Well, that's when my personal practice. That's how I would do it. I
right.
have my playlist is loud and is aggressive.
Ooh, you should share your playlist.
No,
No,
it's mine
absolutely not.
because it turns into white noise for me
Yeah.
because it's mental training. So show up to this class, tell them, hey, we're gonna mix it up today. We're gonna play a bunch of punk, whatever, and all the people who are usually really strong in asana practitioners, they start to like kind of wilt under this loud music, like playing the Sex Pistols, the Idols, the Ramones, all of this stuff is just going on, and they're like struggling, right? People who are usually very strong with balance work are kind of all over the place because their mind's not there, right? They're focusing on the aggressiveness of the music or just that the music's different or whatever.
Yeah.
And at the end of that class, lady who had been coming to my classes for a long time, she gets up, angrily rolls up her mat, leaves, goes, finds my boss, and starts yelling at my boss.
Oh.
Like, he played rock and roll high school in that class, and I'm upset about that. And my boss was like, "Why are you upset about it?" Well, my boyfriend used to play that song all the time when I was in high school, and I now had to think about him for an hour because he played that song. And
Poor thing.
poor,
Oh. Gotta empathize with her
I
right
get
now.
it, but again, it was about the idea of putting yourself into that position where not everything is in your control.
Mm-hmm.
And noticing before it lands, like if you heard the first, 2 bars of rock and roll high school, you knew where this was going to go. So why'd you give yourself away to it?
Yeah.
Why'd you lose your entire hour because of that? So learning to kind of accept it for as it is, but learning to take it and point it in a different direction because you know where it ends up going. And if you continue to kind of create that path with it all the time, you're going to end up in negative space.
Mm. Okay.
And you don't want to have an unhappy reaction to the Ramones rock and roll high school, do you?
Yeah, no. I mean, punk is not dead. And like, I'm sorry for anyone who can't get through a yoga class.
Because of rock and roll high school.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we run into it all the time, though, right?
But yeah, I mean, because like, I mean, you know, the that goes back to the whole expectation though. If you walk into a space like a yoga class, you have an expectation, and you changing up that expectation is like a little lesson in removing your expectations, or like what to do when something doesn't go as you had expected or
Right.
anticipated.
So then I think you're up against the choice. And for that woman, she never came to my class again because of that experience.
You think she went and stalked her ex-boyfriend on
I don't
Facebook?
know. She was certainly not listening to the Ramones, is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. So like you, like that's sad that someone could change up the yoga practice or what you can find in a yoga asana class when your expectations aren't met.
Right, but it's more, so if we take it out of the yoga studio and off the mat and put it in real life, so what are we going to do? Are we not going to face it? Or are we always going to look away? So the way that we train ourselves into to deal with that mindfulness, that pre-awareness, is to continue to expose ourselves to it a little bit, because
Mm-hmm.
we can't change the path if we don't expose ourselves to it, right?
How do you actively expose yourself to
Well,
it?
back to the coffee shop analogy. If I quit drinking coffee, that's a way of not exposing myself to it, right? If I
Yeah.
never stood in another line in my life, that's a way of not exposing myself
Yeah.
to it. I mean, I remember reading an article about this woman who was afraid of taking left turns when she was driving her car. So she spent her entire life, like, she would map out her paths to
Turning
only
right.
take rights. That seems to
Yeah.
be a bad way to live your life.
Deeply rooted.
And also, it just seems like you end up in a circle.
Yeah.
So,
I like to call going around my elbow to get to mass. We can fast forward.
Jen's just blurting stuff out now.
Sorry.
But
No, I.
you have to go back there, and I'm not saying, like, if it causes you trauma, like in that instance, if that woman was that traumatized by the song, then um, it doesn't mean you put yourself into that ugly, scary space all the time.
Yeah.
But putting yourself slowly back in there and training yourself to try the behavior differently
Mm-hmm.
and see what the outcome looks like.
Yeah, I don't think you can actively do that or plan for that without a very strong mindfulness routine and ritual, because it is in those moments where you've trained yourself to not just recognize but know how you responded before and how you can do it so it doesn't negatively stir you or impact you or those around you.
Right.
It just takes a lot of work.
Takes a lot of work, and then quite honestly, that's what the exercise is about.
Yeah.
Um, because it's not you're never going to be in a perfect situation to sit and meditate or sit and do your
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness work, right? We live in a world that's constantly bombarded with all sorts of stimuli, and we're, like, expected to always be mindful and always be patient and always be compassionate. It's difficult. We're human beings,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But the more we work in maybe a closed environment where we can, like, you're sitting on your mat in a room where the temperature's right and the music's nice and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, that's a way in. But the more we do, we take away the music, we take away the comfortable room, we remove the mat, we remove the sitting part, right? So we can become mindful
Mm-hmm.
in everyday life. That's the practice. So we could eventually, if you wanted to just sit your butt down in the middle of Hartsfield International Airport and meditate undisturbed, you certainly could.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's a goal that anyone should try to do,
Yeah.
but those are the things that we're working on.
Absolutely.
And understand that you're going to fall down and you're going to go back to those old pathways on occasion, and that's okay too, because being aware of that
Being aware
falling
is,
down is important.
yeah, absolutely. And knowing, like, every time you find yourself, me personally, I find myself aware of my triggers, of what stirs me, um, is just one step in the direction of healing from that cause, or doing things differently and changing, my reaction.
Changing the outcome, and sometimes it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Sometimes it's just insignificant too. Like we think, where's the big transformation?
Where's the?
Where's the big
I was
transformation?
so kind to the person to me in
Yeah,
traffic.
and
Why? Where's my
still,
ticker
why did
tape
you give
parade?
me the bird?
Right.
Why
Yeah.
did you give me the bird? So you can't. That's the thing. Again, that's an expectation. Like,
Yeah.
I was nice to you. Why aren't you nice to me? Well, that you can never live like that. That's impossible, because who knows what's going on in their mind,
Mm-hmm.
like in their human condition. So again, shenpa is like the idea of, like, let's get ahead of it a little bit. Let's know it before it lands. It doesn't mean we hide away from it and avert ourselves from it. We need to kind of face it. And like we all struggle with it, um, but giving yourself that opportunity, play with it, and then you may be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Then you start to build new pathways, and you start to um, not let the hooks land, or if they
Yeah.
do land, they don't mean as much to you.
Right.
And then maybe rock and roll high school is a whole lot more enjoyable
A
now.
lot more enjoyable.
What else you got today?
I that was pretty good.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay. Again, we planned this so perfectly.
Yeah.
I think we always doing great work. You're doing great work.
You're doing great work. I'm glad we're doing this great work together.
Amen.
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 What else you got for me today? Nothing?
Nope, I don't have much.
All right. Well, if you got any questions for us, feel free to message us on all the socials. We're on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Thank you to everyone who has sent questions or thoughts or ideas, either to podcast or future podcasts. We really appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You too.